Hello, James here. Why not do something pretty different this time? And I'm going to show you the background of why, if you particularly this is geared towards black people, and you're probably already asking why do we do the things that we do, and why it end up with the outcome that we end up when it comes to prejudice and racism, and why do we worship another culture in certain ways. I'm about to show you videos, and I'm going to edit it. I'm not going to go too long, try not to make it long and very boring. But I'll get my commentary afterwards.
The topic of slave breeding is a sensitive and complex one, as it involves the coerced reproduction of enslaved individuals during the era of American slavery. While the historical understanding of this topic has evolved over time, in this video, you'll discover 10 lesser-known harrowing facts that shed light on certain aspects of slave breeding in America. Before we delve into the history of the dark and deeply troubling practice of slave breeding in America, I think you should know what slave breeding means. Slave breeding was a slave multiplication agenda implemented by slave owners through forced sexual relations between male and female slaves, and between slave owners and their female slaves. This sexual relationship was solely intended to reproduce slave children as essential stock for trade. The practice was prevalent in southern sex farms and slave breeding farms after the abolition in the early 19th century. Unfortunately, these are slave breeding facts that schools have failed to teach over the years. So that's exactly what we're going to cover in this documentary. Let's get into it. The movement to abolish slavery in America gained strength from the 1830s to the 1860s, led by free black people such as Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, and white supporters such as William Lloyd Garrison, founder of the radical newspaper The Liberator, and Harriet Beecher Stowe, who published the best-selling anti-slavery novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. The prohibition on the importation of slaves into the United States after 1808 limited the supply of slaves in the United States. So slave owners created the slave breeding program to ensure they didn't run out of labor. What you're about to learn may be uncomfortable, but they were the realities. Slaves were subjected to the most inhumane forms of oppression. So, starting with fact number one. Number one, slave breeding was a practice employed by some slaveholders with the intention of increasing their enslaved labor force. Enslaved individuals were forced to reproduce to produce more enslaved people who could be used as laborers. Slave owners viewed enslaved individuals as valuable assets and sought to expand their workforce by encouraging or coercing their slaves to have children. The offspring of these slaves would become property and contribute to the slaveholders' economic interests. This practice was prevalent, particularly in the southern states. Enslaved women, in particular, were seen as valuable commodities. Their reproductive capabilities exploited to fulfill the economic interests of their owners. To understand the lived experiences of these women, we turn to various historical accounts, including testimonies from enslaved individuals themselves. Although a lot of evidence has been buried and some destroyed, we can draw upon broader narratives and personal testimonies to grasp the impact of this practice. Frederick Douglass, a prominent abolitionist and former enslaved person, provides insight into this disturbing reality in his narrative. He vividly describes the harsh circumstances faced by enslaved women, recounting their exploitation as breeding machines. In his words, "I've often been weakened at the dawn of day by the most heart-rending shrieks of an own aunt of mine, whom he used to tie up to a joist and whip upon her naked back, till she was literally covered with blood. No words, no tears, no prayers from his gory victim seemed to move his iron heart from its bloody purpose. The louder she screamed, the harder he whipped, and where the blood ran fastest, there he whipped longest." Testimonies like Douglass's shed light on the brutal treatment endured by enslaved women who were subjected to forced breeding. They were often separated from their partners and forced into unwanted sexual relationships with several men to bear children for their owners' economic gain. Furthermore, historical documents provide additional evidence of this dehumanizing practice. For instance, plantation records and advertisements for the sale of enslaved individuals frequently mention their reproductive capabilities as a selling point. These documents demonstrate how the institution of slavery reduced women to objects solely valued for their reproductive abilities. Another compelling testimony comes from Harriet Jacobs, an enslaved woman who authored an autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. In her powerful narrative, Jacobs recounts her experience of being sexually exploited and coerced into bearing children. She writes, "I knew nothing." In the event of a global communications breakdown, do the following. Avoid strangers.
We've all been deserted.
I don't trust them. Stay off the roads. Get in the car!
Habibi Fahoudier and blessings to the ancestors. It's Deshaun here with a new OPP video, here to discuss the role of the black bourgeoisie by the Western power structure to maintain control over their black and African subjects in Black America, the Caribbean, and the motherland. This video is going to build off somewhat off of the integration and black nationalism video, where the objective of those who seek to integrate ultimately result in the moving on up class, who is used to capture and contain the black masses. To start off, let's use a working definition of the black bourgeoisie as explained by Walter Rodney, stating, by and large, the personnel who control the reins of power undoubtedly adhere to the norms and the values of the bourgeoisie in the Western Centropoles, but they do not control any capital formations. At best, they own 2 or 3 houses and they own 1 Mercedes-Benz, plus a Volkswagen, and so on and so forth. But these are not capitalists. Now, the purpose of this elite class of Negroes are to serve as the gatekeepers of the respective societies as token symbols of representation to the lower black African masses on acceptable behaviors, norms, and expectations granted by their white capitalist clients. In doing so, they are able to enjoy some of the fruits that the white dominant society offers, such as token positions within their corporations, political positions of power, and allowing their children to attend their predominantly white institutions, or PWIs, such as universities, or grants to their non-profits or non-governmental organizations. I'm going to explain later how this produces detrimental results down the road, but let's provide historical data that demonstrates this bourgeoisie dynamic in key regions of the diaspora and the motherland. In the Caribbean, this dynamic was first displayed in the post-slavery period, where a lighter mixed mulatto class of black folk, they were offsprings of their white slave masters and merchants who held significant positions of power throughout the Caribbean as a buffer class. Colin Grant describes this class dynamic in Jamaica in his biographical work of the most honorable Marcus Garvey, called Negro with a Hat, stating, those in opposition to Garvey's UNIA were descendants of white planters who raped and enslaved African women, the light-skinned Jamaican elite. They constituted the vast majority of decision makers in Jamaican society, and who were most outraged by one word, Negro, or black. No one, least of all of the aspiring brown artisans, bank clerks, and civil servants who would have willingly checked off a box denoting their racial classification. The word Negro in practice was an insult. Once decolonization of the Caribbean came in the 1960s and 1970s, a new predominantly black class of bourgeoisie replaced the old elite. This small minority would be propped up by foreign capitalists and former Western colonial powers who had patterned the new so-called independent Caribbean governments on the European parliamentary system, such as the Westminster, that enabled Western interests and investors to maintain their power and making the region dependent on tourism to keep the economy afloat. This same venture would compensate this new black elite by inviting more quote-unquote real estate developers, hotelers, and white tourists to visit. Walter Rodney describes this bourgeoisie element in the Caribbean, stating, the national government of the petty bourgeoisie has little control over production and is endowed with a very feeble political base. They of course have police and military forces which is intended to serve as a means of coercion of the population, but nothing else. The bourgeoisie, out of necessity, will engage the large middle class sector and a large segment of the working population in parliamentary politics such as free speech and etc. However, the petty bourgeoisie cannot afford to have any formal exercise in democracy. They do not have the power. They do not have the economic base. They are entirely dependent on 2 things. Firstly, their external support, in other words, foreign support, and secondly, whatever local police forces they can muster. Now, turning our focus to the motherland, at the outset of the conquest of Africa, toward the end of the 19th century, Europeans installed their own bourgeoisie in its new African colonies. By introducing Christian religions and European cultural norms and values, the Europeans used various tactics to groom a class of black Africans to serve their mother country's interests. Molefe-Sante describes this process of indoctrination in his work History of Africa, stating, "The French used assimilation, the British used collaboration of some local kings and ethnic groups, intermarried with the local African women, relying heavily upon the creation of a buffer class composed of children of the Portuguese settlers and Africans to eliminate all opposition to Portuguese rule." Indirect rule was a British policy advocated by Frederick Lugard, who argued in his 1922 book, The Dual Mandate in British Tropical Africa, that it was better to use local leaders to carry out the British governance rather than using settlers. If he could not find hereditary kings to his liking, he would replace them with puppets who would collaborate with the British. France also applied this governing strategy by corrupting some of the traditional leaders who enjoyed material rewards because of collusion with the colonizers. Another example of the grooming of an African bourgeoisie is found in the Congo and many Francophone countries. The term ouvrier is a term that's used to describe Africans who aspires to integrate into the overall colonial system. It is described as the native under French colonial rule could gain access to the superior plane of humanity through assimilation into French culture and society, with the ultimate reward of becoming an ouvrier. This implied getting rid of one's culture, religion, language, beliefs, and sense of belonging. Of course, the promise of full and equal citizenship dangled by the colonial skin was never actually fulfilled. It was always remained a horizon for the colonized to strive for, without ever being able to reach, and a very powerful means of social control for the colonizer. During the post-colonial period, many of these African bourgeoisie eventually assumed political positions of power due to their Western orientations to the expectations of their former European masters, while assisting to make their newly independent countries client states of the West. Finally, in Black America, the growth of a black bourgeoisie was a gradual process from the outset of the post-Civil War period. As with the Caribbean, mixed light-skinned blacks already had some freedom of movement in the South, but with the end of slavery came a problem for the wealthy plantation owners and northern industrialists on what to do with the free Negroes of America. This gave birth to a new black bourgeoisie who would become the hand-picked Negroes who would form and shape the future identity of the black elite. In E. Franklin Frazier's Black Bourgeoisie book, he exemplifies the formation of this black elite, stating, "Since the creation of these philanthropic foundations, such as the Peabody Fund, until the present, the Negro intellectual has been forced to shape not only his philosophy of racial adjustment, but his general social philosophy according to the social philosophy of the Northern, or in other words, white philanthropic foundations. It has not been necessary, of course, for the foundation to make explicit demands upon the Negro teacher or intellectual. The Negro teacher or intellectual realized that if he were to secure employment, he must indicate that his ideas of racial adjustment conform to the social philosophy of the foundations. This same class of well-meaning white folks will repeat this process throughout the 20th century, financing the creation of either black bourgeoisie-led or integrationist organizations such as the Sigma Phi Phi, or prominent civil rights groups such as the NAACP or Urban League. Contemporarily, this bourgeoisie is described by the late Glenn Ford, stating, "The current black misleadership class voluntarily joined the enemy camp, calling it progress, as soon as the constraints of official apartheid was lifted," referring to the aims of the civil rights movement. They exploited the political and business opportunities made possible by a people's mass movement in order to advance their own selfish agendas, and in the process made a pact with the white power structure to assist in the disbasement and incarceration of millions of their brothers and sisters. In the case of black elected officials, their culpability is direct and hands-on. What is the end purpose of the white power structure to groom this black bourgeoisie? The end objective is to cultivate a class of black bourgeoisie that will serve as internal agents of the ruling Western class. Instead of the harsher settler colonial rule in the former European colonies in Africa and the Caribbean, Western countries adopted Frederick Lugard's previously mentioned prescription in a more subtle approach in indoctrinating locals to handle the administration and resource extraction to achieve the same geopolitical exploitative objectives. Instead of being the visible white faces of oppression, they can use their trained bourgeoisie as the black mask, as referred to by Frantz Fanon. In Black America, this dynamic is played out somewhat differently, as the black bourgeoisie are largely clients of the liberal Democratic Party, where they are responsible to maintain the party's black voter majority and advantage in exchange for token symbolism and black appointees of political power and nothing in return of substantive value or policies to change the conditions of the black masses. The end result of this indoctrination is excellently summarized by Nigerian author Chinwensu, stating, young and bright-eyed recruits to elite status visualize for themselves not a lifetime of productivity, but one of security and luxuries and luxurious indolence. It is for the West to produce the luxuries they love. It is the peasants of Africa to produce the export crops or raw materials that earn the foreign exchange, and it is for the petty bourgeoisie elite to use the peasants' earnings to buy for their own glamorous consumption of the West. From my point of view, the OPP agenda will help us break this bourgeoisie relationship by developing
Du Bois' book, The Souls of Black Folk. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of the world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One never feels his totalness. On American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. The history of the American Negro is the history of this strife, this longing to attain self-consciousness, manhood, to merge his double self into a better and truer self. So, W.E.B. Du Bois talking about the double consciousness of the African American in America. Black people struggling with being black in America because we exist in a white society. And we've been conditioned to believe that we have to exhibit white characteristics and basically become white, become palatable to whiteness to be successful. So everything about you is not good enough to be successful. You must model whiteness. You must become a white person in a black person's body in order to be successful. That's what we're fighting against. That is not true. You don't have to become white. Think white, live white, eat white, talk white. You don't have to do that to be successful or become somebody. You can be your authentic black self. But the problem is we have to relearn how to be our authentic black selves, because all we know is how to be palatable to whiteness. Think of what white people believe to be the stereotypical black man, the stereotypical black woman. Think of all the things we know white people and others have been taught or socialized to believe about us. Now think about what we truly are, what our parents and communities raised us to be. In the face of the media's onslaught, those of us without the tools to defend ourselves come to fulfill the roles of dominant culture tells the roles that dominant culture tells us we must play. We can end up acting out self-degrading behaviors by which we exploit one another for material gain, distorted admiration, and an appearance of power. One of the ways that PTSS is reflected today can be seen in the reoccurrence of such stereotypical behavior. Take the role of the black male, for example. Black males were valuable to slave owners in a number of ways, the most obvious being their ability to perform arduous manual labor. Another, however, was their breeding capability. So think about today how black men are seen as
Football players.
laborers as wallets, muscles, and something just to take the brunt of all the ills, right? Wallets and muscles. So the black males assured the continuance of the human products. I mean, wallets, muscles, and penises. That's what I meant to say. Black men are seen as wallets, muscles, and penises. That's it. That's all we're good for. Is our money, our muscle, and our penis. So the black males assured the continuance of the human products that could be sold and trained in lifelong servitude. The role of the breeder was a sought-after position on the plantation because it offered special privileges like food and special jobs and power among those slave populations. Today, this role has morphed and reemerged to become the street hustler womanizer and the more contemporary gangster pimp, repeat with present-day material and social rewards. The audacious and flashy zoot suits of the 30s and 40s became the full-length furs, large brim hats, and platform shoes of the 60s and 70s. Today we see oversized leather designer trousers and diamond stud earrings, while Hummers and Bentleys have replaced the highly priced Cadillac Eldorados and Lincoln Continentals of the past. Entertainment provides other examples. Minstrels and vaudevillians set the stage for some of the first popularized stereotypic and racist images of black people. In the early 1900s, minstrel shows featured individuals, both white and black in blackface, idealizing slavery life by showing blacks in embellic and happy folks who adored their slave masters. Slaves were portrayed as people who mostly sang and danced and cheerfully ate pig entrails and watermelon to pass the time. These shows were well attended and were the first opportunity for blacks to perform on stage. In the 1970s, in the 1970s, a new crop of exploitative performances surfaced. The black exploitation films like Superfly, Shaft, Trick Baby, The Mac, and Sweetback's Badass Song, just to name a few, depicted black men as violent, criminal, and oversexed. Black women were depicted as docile and submissive, or domineering and manipulative. In each case, women were portrayed as sex objects to be abused and controlled. Some recent examples are films like Training Day and Monsters Ball that bear a striking resemblance to the blaxploitation films of the past. They differ only in that they are far more graphic and abysmal. There have been some constructive changes since the 1970s in the film industry. However, there are still few roles for black actors where their versatility and skills as artists can be positively showcased. So I just put out a short the other day called From Jungle Bunnies to Black Excellence, depicting how black actors or black people were depicted in black cinema throughout the ages, and how the images did become better but have gotten worse over time. So we have more control to be able to create better images, but at times we don't. If you go to Tubi and you see all the black movies is the same gangster, come up type, drug dealing type movies. So
ruled by a certain class.
We've made some progress, but we've regressed as well. But what she's getting at though is we've gotten to the point to where these stereotypes have become so normal that we are now not only adopting the stereotypes, but defending the adoption of the stereotypes and saying we're giving them power. That's always the excuse. We're taking the negatives and turning them into positives.
We're saying that's black culture.
Okay, well, you keep doing that, and while I keep seeing you're not getting any real results from that. Okay. I'm not gonna argue with nobody that want to try to turn negatives into positives. But I can see that you have no real results from turning negatives into positives.
Basically, what she's saying, they want introduced to black culture as that. So when the world sees black people in America, that's what they assume.
Are you going to let the greedy heating companies and their crazy high prices decide if your family is allowed to stay warm this winter? Here's how a former NASA engineer from Michigan is taking on the billion-dollar
someone's
heating
behind this
industry with an
racism.
invention that's helping
You
families
would be
around the
surprised
country.
too.
Before we get started, I want to let everyone know about this video sponsor, me, kinda, by way of my streaming service, Nebula. Nebula is an independent streaming service brought to you by me and a bunch of other creators both on and off of YouTube, where we are providing the best educational and entertainment content that you can find on YouTube and more stuff that you can't find anywhere else. On Nebula, you'll find all of the long-form content that I make here on the FD Signifier channel, as well as my shorter, more pop culture-oriented stuff from Signify B-Sides, which includes a recently vaulted video I did about the controversial legacy of Tupac that was maybe a bit too spicy for general population, except uncut with no commercials and no ad reads like the one you're seeing right now. You'll also find my short essay on the opening scene from the Boondocks and similar work from multiple other creators on YouTube. Examples include Roy Deschanel's video series on sex scenes in films, real-life lore deep dives into the history of conflict in Southeast Asia, and everything that Lindsay Ellis has done in the past few years. Also, this holiday season, Nebula is offering lifetime memberships. This means that you can pay a one-time fee for $300 and get lifetime access to Nebula. No tricks, no gimmicks, no changes. There's a lot to get out of a subscription to Nebula, but most importantly, it helps me as a creator. My success on this platform has not been without numerous challenges and risk, and having Nebula as a strong sponsor allows me to continue to take risk and push the envelope of what can be done on this platform and beyond. So you can get all of the benefits of Nebula and directly help me as a creator by clicking the link in the description or using my promo code FD Signifier to sign up for Nebula at a discounted price for 1 year or more. Thank you so much to Nebula for sponsoring this video, and now on to the video.
6 signs you want to look for that innocent, angelic, sweet white girl's actually dreaming all night long about that dark chocolate.
My family does really get into like fancy talk.
They'll have extensive conversations about cheese.
People that are less argumentative, people that are more agreeable with you, people that may agree with you politically.
You have racial preferences one day?
No. She has a preference, 100%. She prefers white girls and Hispanic girls.
It would look like it does, but I don't.
What about your partner?
Yeah, black women.
My dating preference is black, for sure. Is this the first time you dated a black woman?
No, I ain't new to this.
And I got ass that move white girls like there's coke up my ass crack. Move black girls, cause man, fuck it, I'll do either. I love pussy, I love bitches, dude, I should be running, Peter.
Sexual adventure and a little bit of spice. She wants to be rebellious against her parents.
I learn a new cheese every time I go to Connecticut.
So why in the world would a non-black woman choose a black successful man who makes less money than her white counterparts? What would be the reason?
I guess I had been stretched out in a while, so then I was doing all the stretching. It's like my starting to get numb.
The 4th sign that a white girl is going to be sexually attracted to brown and black guys and want to hook up with you is that you gotta consider that race might not be much of a factor at all. The scientific studies have shown that.
Alright, we are entering into some dangerous territory today. I cast a wide net in terms of people that watch my content. I have fans from a variety of different spectrums and belief systems and experiences, and all of them are going to be pissed at something I say in this video. And normally I would look at that as a good thing, but I don't know. I may just be fucked up. This might be it. This might be it. We'll see. We shall see. Unless you've been hiding under a rock, you've probably become aware of America's next big it couple, international pop star Taylor Swift, and all-pro tight end, Super Bowl champion, and future Hall of Famer Travis Kelce. You can tell that I'm much more of a football fan than the Swifties. There's Swifties. Isn't that a broom? You know what? There's no reason for me to antagonize Taylor Swift fans for this video. I'm gonna have enough smoke on me as it is. We might edit that out. The question though is, how many of you are aware of the girl that came before Taylor Swift? Or the girl that came before that? Or the girl that came before that? Travis Kelce had tons of fans among black women in the last few years because it was obvious that Kelce was a fan of them. but also because he's definitely a good-looking guy, or at least he used to be. See, earlier in the summer, a lot of black women were shocked to see Travis go from shouting what it is to license and registration, please. And I remember making the joke proudly that this meant that he must have found him a white girlfriend, and lo and behold, I was right. Aesthetics go a long way in dictating who you attract. I made a joke on a podcast a while back regarding the I date white woman haircut, which the joke was basically that you can kind of tell whether or not a black man is exclusively seeking out black women based on how he keeps his hair, and there's some patterns that develop there. Look, it just is what it is, and the same thing can be said for a white man, hence Travis Kelce switching up his style around the time he must have started dating Taylor Swift. It's not universal, of course, but it is a thing. Some people got offended, but fuck those people, because they're not really gonna like this video at all, so they might as well just check out now. Despite being a relatively rare cultural phenomenon, the issue of interracial dating is incredibly prominent in our media, and that's not just a product of modern algorithms feeding these images to us. It's something that has been around for generations now. And in response to the attention that this phenomenon gets, there's always a ton of political discourse and conversation occurring on the topic of interracial relationships, race mixing, dating out, miscegenation, whatever word you might want to use. And if you couldn't tell from the movies being used here, in this video I'm specifically talking about interracial relationships featuring at least one black person and more than likely one white person. This is not to exclude other people's experiences with interracial relationships, but for the purposes of this video, the focus is going to be solely on how this specific social phenomenon affects black people and the way we experience, see, and are seen in the world. Anything with black people is inherently political. Being black is inherently political. But with interracial relationships, I think there's a genuine lack of understanding on the complexity of the politics for this topic. As much as I feel like I've heard about this topic for my entire life, I seldom felt like I heard something that was well thought out or well researched or a depthful analysis of the phenomenon. So since this is a topic that has hounded me recently for reasons I'll get to later, I figured now would be a good time to do a lighter, fun video on an issue that I won't say doesn't get enough attention, but maybe not the right type of attention. Don't worry too much though, even though this is possibly a heavier topic. I've done a lot of heavy shit recently, and I wanted to have some fun with this one, so let's jump into the first major section.
Chapter 1. A hard conversation about slavery and
In slavery, black men and women were viewed as subhuman property, as well as hypersexual and animalistic. Our body parts were at times literally dissected and put on display in museums, and our humanity and autonomy was persistently violated, with women being the main target of sexual violence by white slave masters and overseers, often producing biracial children who would then become the legal property of their white fathers. That said, black men were not safe from sexual violence either. Awful homophobic faux documentaries notwithstanding, the practice of sexual torture and humiliation of black male slaves, often referred to as buck breaking, was enacted upon black male slaves by both male and female masters alike. So no black body was safe during slavery. Yet, stories then and now about love affairs between slaves and whites are not rare. These stories often attempt to depict these love affairs as consensual and two-sided, greatly downplaying the obvious power imbalance between a black slave and a white slave owner. But the reality is that even if it wasn't an overt act of physical violence, any intimate contact between a slave and an owner was an act of assault, as these slaves literally had no right to bodily autonomy, thus they could not consent. The most well-known example of this mythology can be found in the story of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Heming. If you allow pop culture and TV to tell it, Sally Heming was a beautiful young biracial slave who beguiled Thomas Jefferson so much that they had a decades-long affair which produced multiple children. This relationship has been depicted in media multiple times, and in pretty much every case, it's implied that Hemings and Jefferson were in love, and that Hemings was more than a willing participant in this affair, and that Jefferson was torn between his heart and his duty as one of America's founding fathers. This, of course, is a pretty awful bleaching of the real history involved here. First and foremost, Hemmings was technically the half-sister of Jefferson's wife, Martha Hemmings, a product of the rape of Hemmings' mother by English Captain John Hemmings. Sally remained the property of that family in Virginia until she was 14, when she then accompanied Jefferson's daughter, also named Martha, to Paris, where Jefferson spent several years. That is where she began her romance with Jefferson, who at the time was 44. Hemmings would have her first child in Paris at 16 and sire more children over the course of this relationship with Jefferson. Hemmings had the opportunity to be free in Paris, but agreed to stay with Jefferson due to her children technically being his property, and thus accompanied him back to Virginia. Ironically, even this romanticized, bleached version of the story was never told for a long time, considered unfounded rumors. It took generations to first have this relationship be acknowledged by many historians, and even then the black descendants of Thomas Jefferson were often excluded from his legacy until relatively recent. This was the reality of love affairs between slaves and slave masters during slavery. And after slavery ended, a slew of legal practices and not so legal social and cultural norms were put in place to maintain a rigid social hierarchy with black people at the bottom. The goal of most of these practices was to make it pretty much impossible for anyone black to be able to vote, own land, or hold certain licenses that might allow them to increase their lot in life. And as a result, black folks often set out to create and build communities amongst themselves where these laws and these barriers were not in place. Due to this separation, rarely was the issue of race mixing a legitimate thing to worry about outside of a few isolated incidents. And this was because it was explicitly illegal, and not just illegal, but also basically punishable by death by way of mob violence. Lynchings, riots, and acts of white terrorism were the ever-present threat to black people who stepped out of line, especially black men who were mythologized as these insatiable sexual fiends who craved white flesh. It's important to remember that black people were never intended to be full participants in American society. It took another century, a full 100 years, to have it written into law that black people should be fully protected under the law by way of voting rights, anti-lynching laws, and anti-discrimination laws, etc., because of the Civil Rights Bill of 1966. But even then, miscegenation or interracial relationships were still explicitly illegal until 1968. Anti-miscegenation laws were in place for the purpose of maintaining that hierarchy, to give a white monopoly on property rights so that the state could literally dissuade and punish the few white men who did want to take black women as wives and share their wealth and resources with them, which might create a situation down the line where black people might have legal rights to land ownership and capital that was expected to be permanently possessed by white people. The issue has never been about love, but about power and the role that racism plays in maintaining power. The core conflict of black people in interracial couplings is the same as the core problem of pretty much everything involving black people, which is the historical and persistent impact of racism on every facet of black life, including who you love and marry. In fact, especially who you love and marry. Black relationships overall are wrought with conflict, and interracial relationships have their own unique set of challenges because the experience of being black brings a vast array of baggage into the relationship. And this presents a problem to a lot of non-black would-be partners of black people, because their general lack of understanding about the black experience can lead to a lot of misunderstandings with their partner. They don't know that previous history, or even if they do know it, they don't understand it, or they don't quite know how that history still impacts the way black people move through the world today. But in general, most black people are well aware of how this history impacts them. They may not get every aspect, they may not be able to cite all the theories and authors and academics and whatnot, but they feel it internally. And this knowledge is kind of diffused over how black people often perceive relationships, whether positive or negative in that perception. They're asking, is he with her because he values whiteness over everything? Is she with him for economic viability? Is he going to treat her right or exploit this power imbalance? Or do these folks just love each other and want to live their lives? In a perfect world, that last sentence will be the only one that pops into my brain when I see an interracial couple. But unfortunately, the history of racism in this country and the way that interracial relationships have often come into conflict with the black experience makes that impossible. And all of that starts with the experience of slavery.
Chapter 2, it's a black thing and you wouldn't understand. Okay, Feek, just a little note on the titles here. I'm not sure I'm the best person to be reading these. It's up to you. But yeah, I just worry that maybe there's more appropriate people.
A Pew Research study in 2017 found that black people are actually twice as disapproving of interracial relationships as white people. This may be shocking to some of you, probably because y'all don't know any black people. Now, the reflex that some white folks will have at this information is to say, see, I told you black people are the real racist. Because that's what they do. Racists, ironically, spend a lot of time pointing at other people as the real cause of the racism. People who are often the victims of racism often are their targets. That's how affirmative action was killed. That's why in Florida or Texas, kids learned that slavery was not all that bad and it gave black people good job skills. Now, it's not good that so many black people are against interracial marriage, but that doesn't mean it has the same reasoning or outcomes. Like, there's not a history of black people hanging white men from trees with their dicks cut off for whistling at a white woman. Still, in some sense, if you said black people are more likely to be against interracial relationships than white people, there is some data to prove this, but more on that data later. The question is, why? Why is it genuinely different than the inverse situation, and why is the disparity there in the first place? And this is super hard to explain without going into a ton of black history and African American studies, let alone things about blackness that you can't learn from a book. But I realized I could do a relatively decent job tying a ton of different pieces of history and philosophy together by talking about one prominent modern figure. So brace yourself as I finally talk about the Prince of Pan-Africanism, the administrator of anti-miscegenation, one, Dr. Umar Johnson. For those who are unaware, Dr. Umar Johnson is a popular black political influencer with nearly 1 million followers on Instagram, a couple of hundred here on YouTube, and probably many more elsewhere. He does a lot of media appearances and public speaking and is known for a relatively niche brand of pro-black politics that he and others tend to refer as Pan-Africanism, though his brand of...
Let me stop right here. But he wants to go to the Supreme Court. I forgot to mention this in the video, where two of the black justices are in interracial relationships. And he wants to bring a petition to overturn, and I think it's in the video. And I forgot Clarence Thomas is in his wife is white, and Ketanji Brown husband is white, but he wants to go before a court. Let's get back to the video.
Is more popularly referred to with the pejorative term hotep. In fact, if you trace the etymology of the term hotep as a pejorative, it probably goes back to Dr. Umar's rise in popularity in the early 2010s. And this is because Dr. Umar was instantly a divisive figure in black culture. Some loved him for his bombastic personality and relatively spot-on critiques of white supremacy and systemic racism, but many hated him or didn't take him seriously because he was also prone to wild takes that bordered on conspiracy theories and politics and ideologies that were regressive and exclusionary. He has conservative views on marriage, capitalism, gender, mental health, etc. And it's kind of frustrating because Dr. Umar managed to bring black radical politics to a large audience that it hadn't seen since probably the 1960s. But he took that black radical tradition in a direction that I would argue has not been very helpful. Dr. Umar will be like, schools overdiagnose black children and funnel them into special education programs because they're dominated by white-centered pedagogy. Do I not know this word? Do I not know the word pedagogy? Because they are dominated by white-centered pedagogy and lack cultural competency to teach black children.
The criteria, I'll give them to you now.
Go ahead.
Loses things necessary to get his work done.
Okay.
Acts like he's driven by a hand or motor. Taps with his hands and feet. Blurts out answers. Has difficulty sustaining attention. Loses things necessary to get his work done.
Yeah.
Has trouble playing quietly. First of all, what child plays quietly? Okay. Second of all, do you know what I just described to you? I didn't describe to you a mental disorder. I described to you a normal black boy. The black boy doesn't have a problem learning.
Right.
He has a problem being mistreated by people who don't understand him.
Prosperity isn't about politics.
Consumer Cellular, this is Sam. How may I help you? This is a butt dial. Well, somebody's butt. Just thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular, you can get the same exact coverage as the leading carriers, but for up to half the price.
Y'all turn each other into bullet bags. Meanwhile, let's see what black men were arrested for today. Here are the mugshots. Okay, let's just pick this guy, because this guy's from 11 hours ago. Let's see what you guys have been up to today. These kings are kings. Man arrested in Tyler on capital murder warrant. Oh my god. He's so useful to the community. This will be a hard loss for us. We need to get him back. Free the murderer. Free them all.
The video you are about to watch is a deconstruction of a personality, the examination of a character, a few characters in fact, a journey into a fractured mind in an attempt to put those pieces together into a story that makes sense. Along the way, you'll learn about how easily love turns to hate, sparking a rapid descent into darkness, the price of chasing fame and stardom at any cost, and the despair of facing a star-crossed fate. You can learn a lot by looking into someone's eyes. Not quite their life story, but something more. That's why we say that the eyes are the windows to the soul. So whenever you're in search of answers, take a long, hard look into those eyes. I'm the Unspecialist, and this is Soul Searching. A look inside the mind of a divestor. The information in this video is all publicly available. However, the accuracy may not be perfect. As a result, I will ensure that as much information as possible comes from the subject themselves. This video also addresses dark themes such as child abuse, drug abuse, and sexual abuse. Viewer discretion is advised. This is the story of a woman known as Sharika Soul, a 38-year-old divested black woman and adoption survivor. She is the self-proclaimed founder of the hashtag BWDivest, or Black Women Divest, and the key influencer in the Black Women Divest movement. She has a large following on social media with over 85,000 followers on Twitter, 35,000 on Instagram, and 329,000 on TikTok. She's well known for going viral with her takes on dating and relationships, sharing her adoption story, and her thoughts on men, black men in particular.
This is for the black men that are harassing and threatening me because they found out I have a half-white son. First of all, it's not that you're black that I didn't date you. It's that most of you speak to women like you're standing on a prison yard, and I don't find that attractive. Secondly, no one complains when black men date outside of their race and give their wealth to women outside of their race. But you have a problem when you see a black woman that has dated outside of their race. Is it because you're trying to convince us that we were undesirable when the fact is you're the one that's undesirable and you only have a certain amount of options and we figured it out? I'm trying to understand why men are so shocked that women have decided we don't want to be a free maid and do your laundry until we're nursing home age and take care of you while you cheat on us with half the neighborhood. Like, marriage doesn't look that good, guys. And I'm just trying to understand, why are y'all so shocked that women don't want to do that? I am bitter because I have never met a man that didn't abuse me in some way. And I don't understand why I should have to keep trying to find a man that isn't going to be abusive to me so that I can live happily ever after. I think that it shouldn't be that hard for me to find a good guy. But unfortunately, all that's out there is a bunch of liars and abusers, and I give up.
I don't give a shit if you think I talk about chicken too much. I fucking love chicken. I eat it every day. In fact, I just had some. I don't give a shit if you think I'm crazy.
It's easy to look at the person on the other side and dismiss them as crazy, a lunatic. However, that's intellectually lazy. Even if your initial judgment is accurate, there's always more to the story. Even if you believe that their statements and actions are unjustified and ridiculous, you have to understand that they think the exact opposite. This reminds me of something Morgan Freeman once said.
Villains don't perceive themselves as wrong, and all heroes do not wear capes. Villains are made, not born. Most times the villain and the hero's beginnings, unlike their endings, take nearly identical shape and form.
Sharika Michelle Banks was born on July 1st, 1984 in Chicago, Illinois. Born into underprivileged circumstances, she was soon given up for adoption. This is where our ill-fated story begins.
You're a victim of abuse as a kid, and you blame Child Protective Services, right?
I do. I was adopted when I was 4, almost 5, with my older sister who's 16 months older than me. We're 16 months apart. So we came from the same adoption home. I had a little brother, but he was adopted at like 6 months old or something. He was adopted right away. Make a long story short, I was adopted by these people that were supposed to be my foster family. I understood they were my foster family. Some time passed, and I remember my mom coming and asking me, did we want to change our names? I didn't, my sister did. So we were adopted. Soon after that, I will never forget, like, my dad was just weird. Like, he would start reaching for me when I was, getting out of the shower, and he would say things like, I'm just trying to see if you wet yourself, and I just always thought that was weird, because, I just dried myself off. So it was just stuff, like, all of a sudden, I just realized, like, my new dad was just weird. And
as soon as they signed the papers,
almost, it seemed like,
that was a trap and a half.
And my dad was very weird. I have a younger sister, I won't say her name, but she has cerebral palsy. And I just remember just sitting there watching my dad supposedly stretching my little sister's legs at night, but I didn't understand why would he need to be stretching her legs at night. Why was he doing that? Why couldn't he do that when she was awake? And I just didn't like it, and so I used to try to infiltrate that, what are you doing? I used to sit by my little sister's door. And I don't know, he did it to me too, and then there was times as I was getting older, like from 7 to 9, I honestly think that he was putting stuff in my breakfast and in my food to make me sleepy and stuff, because I would wake up in my bed.
After adoption, Sharika took her parents' name and became known as Sharika Sawa. Victims of child sexual abuse inevitably deal with the psychological effects of what they suffered. Most commonly, those effects are low self-esteem, feelings of worthlessness, a lack of trust, especially in adults, and an abnormal view of sex. This low self-esteem and a troubled relationship with sexuality often continue throughout their entire lives. They typically have a strong aversion to things of a sexual nature, or they become hypersexual and have a strong interest in sexual things. Sharika fell into the latter category. While still dealing with the demons of her childhood, not too long after turning 18, Sharika started a career in pornography. Her industry name was Miracle. She appeared in 14 X-rated productions with 10 different studios. Most notably, she appeared in Michael Stefano's 2004 production, Feeling Black No. 3, White Guys Down with Brown. She also featured in and made the cover of Bootylicious in 2004, and also featured in the 2011 release of Freaky Black College Girls, alongside Wesley Pipes, Byron Long, and Persuasion, among others. During a Twitter exchange with men who were calling her out for her past in porn, she claimed that as an 18-year-old, she was unaware that when she signed the contract, the videos she would feature in would end up being distributed to stores across America. This isn't the first time former adult content creators have claimed that they were unaware of the implication of their choices while young. So, ideally, Sharika Soul deserves some grace. However, it appears that she hasn't abandoned her adult content creation. She has a $20 a month OnlyFans page under the name Sharika Soul, with a cover photo that's a picture of her partially exposed bosom. The caption says DM for long videos, and given that the location is in California, it's safe to say that the spirit of Miracle still resides in Sharika's mind.
Well, anyway, my band's been doing good. We've been doing a lot of shows, and I've really been just focusing on my music and just getting out there and band practice and all that other good stuff. I haven't really been trying to be funny or anything lately, and I am 2 days away from being 12 weeks pregnant. Hey, what's up, people? I'm 13 weeks. And other than that, I'm having a little bit of baby mama drama, daddy drama. I know who he is, and he knows he's the father and everything. We just don't get along. He thinks I should give it up for adoption. Guess what, people? I am 21 weeks pregnant, almost 22, and that is the beginning of 6 months. The last video I made, I was 13 weeks. My baby daddy is still an asshole. In fact, his mother's an asshole too. And you know, I'm really not like scared to put his name on blast. His name is Patrick Noonan. He has a MySpace. You guys should go type in the name Pat Noonan, Noonan, and cuss him out. Yeah, so to all those like single mothers out there that have to deal with this shit, I didn't know it could be this hard. I didn't know, but it's okay. I have 3 shows coming up, so yes, I'm still doing music, still doing shows. However, I've decided to steer away from my band. I mean, I'm still gonna have my electric guitar doing his little twinkle, but I just feel like I need to simplify my life now that my little boy's coming. Yes, it's a boy. Did I tell you that? Yeah, it's a boy. I've decided to name him Jacob Addison Sower. I'm giving him my last name because I love him. I just signed a lease for a 2-bedroom, so I won't be in this fabulous 1-bedroom anymore. I'm gonna upgrade myself to a 2-bedroom. I am now 28 weeks pregnant. Me and Patrick still don't get along. I don't know, he's coming around slowly but surely, but who really cares about that? Not doing any music, not doing any shows, just can't get myself to do it. I have a show actually August 2nd, and my due date is July 16th, so yeah, I will be doing a show a couple weeks after I give birth, but I'm a strong woman.
In addition to low self-esteem, sexual abuse survivors tend to suffer from anxiety and identity issues. These often lead to aggressive, antisocial, and attention-seeking behaviors. Some sufferers turn to social media for validation and end up exhibiting this attention-seeking behavior in their online interactions with others. In a question and answer segment with band Bombshell, Sharika was quite candid about putting herself out there. She said, "It's true. I'm out there all day long, posting statuses and talking to people and figuring out what can I put together to announce this next thing. I'm constantly socializing with people because it's what brought me here. But in real life, I would rather not socialize." After dipping her toes into the X-rated world, Sharika decided to try to build a music career. From a very young age, Sharika knew that she wanted to be a performer, playing every instrument her parents would put in front of her. After finding her passion in playing guitar and singing, she moved to Los Angeles, California to pursue her dreams. After singing background for acts like UK band Coyote and Angie Stone, she moved back to Iowa and started her band, Lady Soul, alongside guitarist Mike Maya. The band released a few songs and became known in central Iowa. However, there was no hope of a breakthrough until 2012, when Sharika was offered a chance at national recognition through an audition for America's Got Talent. In an article published by Iowa State Daily, Sharika said, "I'm just in this very transitional part of my life. I'm close to 30 and I have a 3-year-old child. What I want to do is something like go on America's Got Talent for the exposure. I want to be bigger than just a band that's known in the central Iowa area, which I feel good about, where we're at, but it's not paying my bills or anything. I'm ready for a more concrete career." Unfortunately, America's Got Talent let her audition, but she didn't advance and they never aired the footage. The Voice also declined to offer her an audition. In another segment of the band Bombshell interview, Sharika said, "Selling out just goes with my goals, you know. When I use the words selling out, I'm actually referring to the word mass success, commercial success, because I want to reach that many people. When I look at Lady Gaga's career, she's affected so many people who felt like they couldn't speak for themselves, or who were depressed, or felt like they didn't fit in. That's the type of effect I eventually want to have on people. So I'm willing, in turn, to make partnerships with people where it might look like I'm just selling out. But my overall goals are a good life for my son and to reach people that walk the same line that I've walked. I've never had anybody but me telling me that I was worth it and that I could make it. When you come from what I've come from, you have nobody but yourself to turn to. I just feel like if I can get really, really successful, then I can help a lot of people. So that's what I'm going for."
I'm gonna stop it right there. Yeah, that young lady needs some. Sounds like she needs some psychological help. But you see, what is the background of a history of this stuff that's going on, and I want to point out these videos. When it comes to black men and black women, mostly black women, but I might go make another video on what she believes is. I think it's just black men, but it's not so much the race of the men. It's the character of the men that some black women have picked. Because on the next video, I'm going to show you that a few videos that show you black women picking outside partners. It was no difference. Even if you got away from the black men, but the men they didn't value their life either. So I want you to check. I'll be making that video. Sorry that this video I wasn't trying to make it real long, but for black people, I just want, and this ain't against anybody, but this goes you. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we think the things that we think? And just examine yourself and what's really going on. This is not to denigrate any other group of people. This is not to put down, but to really tell me, why do you think of yourself the way that you do? That was the purpose of this video. This was not to separate or segregate any other group of people or whatever, but to really examine what's going on with us as a people, and why do we think, where did this come from? Why do we have to do the things that we do? So, and I hope this video goes completely through without getting a copyright strike, but I had to piece it together to understand. So the black person, this is for black people, you would understand why some black people think the way that they do and feel the way that they feel. And for other people, they'll see it too. And they will understand why. Why do black people are like, why they so this and that and other? I got to show the whole picture. And we were made to see history. So this is what you were taught, this is what you were shown. And not only that, to some of the people of the majority was told this through generation after generation, to look at black people like that, to be subhuman. And that's the truth. And when I made the comment about athletes and things like that, that's true. With some people, that's how they see a person who would have a different skin complexion, different hair texture than them, by class. And so obviously they have a natural gift. And then some people took the people who are black natural gift and made tons of money and didn't do the right thing by black people. They took, if the black person was making 100,000, that person who's sponsoring making $1 million to over 5 million to 10 million off that black person. They just give them a chunk of change. And it's still like that to this day. And so what they did was they inhabit the culture. There's another people, there's selective individuals that is controlling black people spiritually. And then some black people don't even see it. And the way we use the names, call us the N-words and stuff like the style and everything. So when it goes national to social media and national media, they look at black Americans like this. They come over and try to mimic this. And they try to take that culture over there into other parts of the world. So when they say that, yeah, why they dress like that? Why they act like that? That's why. Because they say that this is part of black American culture. When you see the guys sagging and gold all in their mouth and stuff like that. Yeah. So this is why some black people, black men and black women feel offended. Because now when they go over there, they're going to think that if you go to the continent of Africa, you got some black people trying, I heard something recently, thinking that they're trying to mimic the style of the black American. This was on Mr. Go Black's channel. And see, we don't consciously don't think that. And we call it just the N-word. We all the N-words. Well, who calls you the N-word? The N-word was the way to keep you subjugated. Now you take a subjugated word and put it to your culture. And white people, some white people don't, some know and some don't know. But the ones that know this. So they can point to me and say, I don't want you to be like those people. I don't want you to be around those people. Why? They the N-word. Think about it. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe till next time. See you on the next video, and I hope this education and this was to focus on black people. We're not defend anybody, but focus on what's wrong with your spirit, with black people's spirit. With some of us. Some of us got it, some of us don't. And the ones that don't will one day wake up. That's what the awakening is about. Take care.